550 KFYI. He's Rob Hunter. I'm Mike Russell. Joining us is Attorney General Mark Brnovich. And I got to tell you, this is a big, big day for the Constitution. It's a big, big day for we the people. The Supreme Court has sided with businesses that didn't want to mandate a jab in the arms of their employees. So, Mr. Brnovich, if you could help us break down what the court actually said.
Well, let us not forget, it was the state attorney generals like myself that led the charge as, the tip of the sword, pushing back against the overreach of the Biden administration. And so today's Supreme Court decisions, because there's really two of them, one decision was great, and that basically said the federal government cannot, through OSHA, mandate private businesses require the vaccine. On the other hand, they also issued a decision which was disappointing that basically said that healthcare workers are not afforded the same rights and that they might be required to get the vaccine. So the good news is at least the Supreme Court put a halt to the unconstitutional vaccine mandates for private employers. So that was a big win, and I'm glad to be part of that.
And essentially what they said, Mr. Attorney General Mark Brnovich joining us, is that the way that OSHA tried to do this, because they are an administrative agency, and implementing a policy that would implement on 84 million people was just too broad, because OSHA's job is not to handle the public health. And overall, the risk of getting COVID inside of work and outside of work is about the same. So you can't really regulate it differently from real life. So it's a pretty big decision in that regard, too. That's the win. But that question remains. They gave that blueprint to Congress, and they said, hey, Congress, here's how you can enact something like this. That's the part that is the blueprint that I'm like, ooh, why did you tell them what to do?
Well, clearly, as you pointed out, and the court pointed out, there's obviously a difference between, safety at a workplace and, public health decisions. And so, the court recognized that. I do think that Justice Gorsuch and his concurrence which was joined by Alito and Thomas, he made it clear that the powers of the federal government are really few and defined and limited. And so he focused on who has the power to make this rule in the first place. And really the power and the question we should be asking is, why does the federal government have this much power to begin with? And I don't believe, and I never have even from the beginning of this, is that any Congress, Republican, Democrat, whatever, has the power to give this kind of authority to the executive branch. And that's one of the things that I have consistently said, and we've talked about it on your guys' show, that no president, Republican or Democrat, has the power to have you inject something into your body. As we've said, the federal government doesn't get to be your nanny, and it shouldn't as hell get to be your doctor.
Now, I'm not sure if there is a vax mandate for healthcare workers for anything other than the actual COVID shot. If they do have it, that's fine. But how can you look at the actual science and you look at the actual numbers and you have Justice Sotomayor up there spouting things that are completely not true? Even in their dissent, they said nearly 1 million deaths from COVID. Obviously, they're not up to date on what's happening. But is it more just to that why couldn't it be argued that this is a vaccine that's not a vaccine? It's just a shot. It's an immunity booster. How can the government even require healthcare workers to do that?
Yeah, this case is really not a debate about the efficacy of experimental vaccines or what may or may not work. It's really about the power of the federal government. And the power of the federal government, the powers of the federal government are few and defined. The states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. So I think that even the most pro-vaccine advocates cannot in good conscience support these mandates because they really are not only unconstitutional, but arguably they're unscientific and immoral as well. And I say that because obviously I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but as you pointed out, I mean, if you can still get the virus and you can still spread it when you've been vaccinated, is that really a vaccine then? And, for my friends out there that argue, there's a polio, we have our kids get the polio vaccine. Well, the reason why polio has essentially been eradicated in the world is because when you get the polio vaccine, you don't get it and you don't spread it. And so, that has been something that has been lost in this. And one of the things that I have mentioned before, and I've had a lot of doctors reach out to me when I've been on the air, and they've said, bravo for bringing this point up, is why has there not been more focus on antibodies? Why aren't we doing more to say, wait a minute, should we be testing for antibodies? Because there is all sorts of research in other parts of the world where if you've had COVID and you've recovered, that you have better immunity than even people that are vaccinated. So sometimes I think that we get this tunnel vision as a society, and science is all supposed to be about the search for the truth, the scientific method where you debate different hypotheses, and you have you look at the research and the results, and then you come to a conclusion. And unfortunately, COVID is becoming less and less about medical science and seemingly more about political science. And I think that's unfortunate for all of us.
It absolutely is, because freedom is at risk here. Attorney General Mark Brnovich is joining us. So, Mr. Attorney General, let's, based on what you guys just talked about right there, you and Mike, about the fact that this is a shot. The way I understand this, and I believe that you've said this before, a private company can do this on their own outside of OSHA if they say, we're going to do this. And they have the authority to do that. However, if that is true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong there, could it be challenged in court by, say, me, if I want to take a company to court and say, no, this is not a vaccine, so therefore you cannot mandate? Is there any legal room there?
Well, there's always legal room. And remember that you always have, the ability to contest something for medical reasons and for religious reasons. And, you don't give up your right to your religious beliefs and faith, just because you go work at the radio station, right? And so I think that's always important to keep in mind. And, the problem is with so much of this discussion regarding this vaccine is that it's not about science. It's not about, ultimately what we can best do to protect our community. I just worry that really the progressive left, it's about a power grab to allow the government to have unprecedented amount of powers and authorities. Everything from not only mandating that you have to put something in your body, but remember, the government tried to shut down businesses. They tried to tell you, all this other stuff that it clearly exceeded their authority. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I sided against the governor and with the bar owners and the gym owners when they wanted to remain open, because at some point, just because you're the government doesn't give you this unprecedented authority to not only control people's lives, but control their livelihoods and their businesses.
Is there a wave of lawsuits on their way? Do you see something, maybe even class action, where those that felt the government had mandated it, or when Biden announced that any contractor working with the government or was receiving federal funds must put a mandate into place regardless of how many employees they have? Do you see any fight back legally?
I think we're going to see more lawsuits, but one of the things that we don't talk enough about is not only does the virus seemingly have its own, set of, powers or rights or whatever, but when the healthcare companies, when the drug companies, they have all sorts of liability and immunity and protections with this, with what's going on with the vaccine and all these debates. And to me, that's also problematic because, why should they get a free ride? Why should they be immune from liability? Because I think that de-incentivizes them from making sure that the vaccine is as safe as possible. I mean, think about this. We know every drug has a side effect, even aspirin, right? The wonder drug. If you have a heart attack, it can save your life. It helps you with arthritis, but it also causes, ulcers and other internal issues. And so we as people, freedom, liberty means that we should be able to make decisions that we believe are best for us and for our families. And I worry once again that this notion that the government, any level of government, is going to tell you when it's safe or not safe, it's building that dependence on central authority. I think that's a very dangerous thing, and obviously I think that's clearly contrary to our Constitution.
Are there any other challenges that are in the pipeline right now that are outside of what we just was ruled on by the Supreme Court?
Yeah, well, I think what we're doing right now, our lawyers were analyzing. Remember, we still have a case pending here in Arizona about federal employees, and there's also the issue with federal contractors. And so there are several legal issues that are still left unresolved at this point that I think are going to continue to wind their way through the courts. And so I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep pushing back. And my hope is that this is the beginning of the end of the unconstitutional Biden mandates. And so hopefully this is a first step and a first signal.
We would love that as well. Mr. Attorney General Mark Brnovich, always appreciate the time, particularly on this day with a big SCOTUS decision. This is Russell and Hunter. In a moment.